If you've ever seen a top player like Justin Wong or Daigo Umehara on stream, you might also hear that they have strong fundamentals. I agree, but what does that even mean? And how do they even get these fundamentals in the first place? Fundamentals are skills that can transfer between game to game, but no one ever talks about what these skills are, how to improve in them, or more importantly, the different types of fundamental skills that can exist. For example, Justin is known for his ability to be patient, not crack, and wait for the right timing, while Daigo is more known for his ability to make psychic reads and to innovate the gameplay meta. Both of these players have goated fundamentals, but they specialize in different skills and different areas, which means that they also have relative weaknesses to their strengths. But before we get to this, or how I've personally improved my fundamentals over time and what you can take away from this, we need to define all the skills that make up fundamentals. I broke it down into 10 different categories along with players who exemplify each skill, and we'll start with the first skill, reactions. Now, I think there's a lot of different ways to define the skill. I think of someone that's really good at spacing, or really good at footsies, or really good at like anti-airing, or really good at reacting to many different things in neutral. The first person I think of this that exemplifies reactions is Xiaohai. Now, I've personally played against Xiaohai, and Xiaohai is kind of known as he's like the only person that can react to a short hop in King of Fighters. Reacting to a short hop is insanely fast, and you can't just like stick out a button. You can stick out preemptively, but in order to react, you generally have to have either a really strong crouching normal, which not a lot of characters have, or an invincible DP. And so being able to react to a very quick jump with a DP is something that only a few players can do, and Xiaohai I think is easily the most consistent at it. The other person I think of is Punk. Punk in Street Fighter V kind of evolved the meta because his reactions were just so strong with Karen. So a lot of people didn't think that you could hit confirm crouch medium kicks in Street Fighter V. Punk showed that not only is it possible, it's possible to do very consistently. And if you apply the very good hit confirming skills of Punk along with the ability to weave in and out of the opponent's buttons and to perfectly place the crouch medium kicks or the sweeps or whatever he's using to whiff punish the opponent, it's no wonder that Punk is one of the best players in the world. You can argue it's like anticipation, right? So when I watch Xiaohai in some of the matches, like against worse players, he's anti-airing everything, but against stronger players, he can't anti-air everything as consistently, right? Because it's harder to anticipate the opponent's moves when they're really good. You can also argue it's raw reaction time. Take, for example, you're actually testing your reaction, and so 178 milliseconds, I recognize that's probably on the better end. I suspect many top players have a benchmark slightly better than this. Even like, let's say a top player has 150 milliseconds, that's almost a 2-frame advantage. And 2 frames can be the difference between something that's reactable and something that's not. Either way, if you're really good at reactions, you're really good at reacting to many different things in the neutral game. Number 2 is kind of the opposite of reactions, which is mental stacking or just being random. I know that's kind of like a derogatory term, being random, but some of the best players are very good at being random. Oftentimes this means that you're really good at running offense. If you've played fighting games, you've probably ran into opponents where you just can't predict what they're gonna do. And if you can't predict what they're gonna do, it makes it very hard to stop. And being random is actually a really important skill. Now, humans are inherently really shitty at being random. This is the reason why rock paper scissors champions exist. This is why terms like forensic accounting exist, because people are bad at making up numbers. This is why Evo Memo 37 exists, because 37 is the most popular number out of 1 to 100. And people that are really good at being random choose their options in a very unpredictable manner. It's not that there isn't logic behind what they choose, it's just that logic is so disguised and it's so well thought out, and there's also like that hint of instinct and reading the opponent, and all those combined into being very unpredictable. If you've ever played online like Street Fighter, you've probably ran into an online Ken who either mashes DP, and then when you try to finally bait the DP, they go for like a walk-up throw or some like absolutely crazy scenario. And those are the same kind of players, but when I think of like a top player, I think of someone like TempestNYC from the Guilty Gear space who plays Leo and is just really good at predicting when you're trying to bait the DP and when you're not going to bait the DP, right? Or very good at like sneaking in this really slow cross up that Leo has, and you could throw it at any time, you can beat it at any time, but he's really good at sneaking in at the moments when you least expect it. Another person from the Street Fighter scene is JB. I think JB is insanely good at mental stacking, probably some of the best I've played in Street Fighter 6, and someone that can like do pretty suboptimal options like round start, drive rush overhead, and have it work really consistently. I think is just someone that gets a really good feel for the opponent's mental and exploits it really hard. And you can also argue Daigo's very good at this, right? Everyone thinks of the Ume Shoryu, and that's kind of what this comes down to, is being able to predict the Shoryuken timing. Even though it's really risky, it's really, really strong. And if you have the read around the Shoryuken, it's hard for it not to pay off. All right, so category number 3 is patience, composure, I guess you could say. It's people that don't crack and wait for the right moment. So I think of 2 people, Goichi and Justin Wong. They will turn you out. They will wait for you to make a mistake. They're very good at forcing you to come to them. They're also very good at just kind of down backing and letting you overextend and then punish you for that overextension. Now, this is one of the skills I feel like is more of an old school skill, especially in games today where it's like every game has their own version of drive rush or dash late or strive. Just, you know, you have a million bullshit ways to get in, but the skill is still very valuable, especially for controlling the clock, for forcing the opponent to come to you and overextending. I also think of these players as ones that have really good defense. So a lot of moves in fighting games, if your opponent is flustered or if they're like distracted, it's really easy to get away with, like drive impact, for example, or throw in Dragon Ball Fighters. And if you look at Goichi had some of the best defense in Dragon Ball Fighters, just being able to stay patient, choose the right options, react to the right things, and not get flustered on defense. I also think of the comebacks Justin has made, like in Ultimate Marvel or in MVC2 or his runaway game with Storm. And these are all skills that transfer to other games as well. All right, skill number 4 is execution. Now, I think this is the number 1 skill that new players should focus on, because if you can't execute a core circle forward or a half circle forward or Dragon Punch motion when you want to, you're basically playing a different version of the fighting game, right? You're basically playing, can I actually execute what I want to execute, as opposed to the actual fighting game. But the people at the top, I think, are ones that just never drop combos, which is weird because I also think of this as like an old school skill. Old games used to have like very high execution ceilings. There used to be combos that only one person could do, like Sako or FAB, where you could tell their playstyle because they were the only person that would go for this particular combo in this situation. Nowadays, I still think this skill exists, but it exists in a different way, which is consistency of inputs, right? I might drop a combo 2% of the time in a actual tournament setting, but someone else might only drop it 1% of the time, and that 1% is a huge difference, considering that could be the difference between a win or a loss. And there are some very technical things you can still go for. For example, in Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, there's like this fuzzy guard instant overhead that's very, very technical to do. Basically, you have to like L cancel your jump in. It's absurdly crazy, really technical, and only a few people in the game can do it, but being able to do that basically gives you a free 50-50 where no one else could do a 50-50. So it still is a very important skill, and it's easily the one at a low level is the easiest to apply across fighting games for sure. All right, skill number 5 is game knowledge. This is weird because a lot of people think of game knowledge as like how much you've actually played the game, and that's not stuff that really transfers over. I'm thinking more of players that can use the game knowledge and leverage it to play as optimally as possible. These are players that are considered like to be cheap, or players that seem to choose the right options more than their opponent. And you can also argue this as a game awareness side of things, right? Because if you're really good at extracting game knowledge and very good at understanding the mechanics of how the game works, you can have better awareness by predicting what's going to happen in a situation you've never seen before, right? A couple of players that come to my mind are Tokido, right? He's always picking like the best character in every game. He studies the game. I mean, you go look at his YouTube, he's literally like wearing a lab coat for like some of his YouTube videos, and he's very methodical about how he approaches the game, and his playstyle is just, it's very surgical, right? It's something like he's always choosing the right option in certain situations, and he's just gonna win strictly based off risk reward, not some of the other skills that other players might have. The reason I think this is a fundamental skill is because being able to extract data from a game and use it to inform your decisions correctly is actually a skill a lot of players aren't as good as you might think. They mostly play on instinct, or they, you know, do what feels right in the moment. But I feel like people that are really good at this skill have a better understanding of risk reward and what would actually work and can exploit it against their opponent. All right, so skill number 6 is, I don't know, it's like innovation. Basically someone that you think of like as a lab monster or a tech monster. This is a legitimate skill that is very, very important. This is a skill that most top players just farm out to Twitter. They're just like, oh, let me see what tech is on Twitter. Okay, let me steal that. Your tech, now it's my tech, right? But even just finding the tech on Twitter and then sifting through what's actually useful and what's not, and then developing the meta based on that stuff, that's a skill in itself. I like to think of these players as also like the people that can find the cheap shit ASAP. Think of someone like Kazunoko, right? Kazunoko is known for picking up the game, finding who the cheap character is like day one, and then having a super streamlined approach, abusing all the cheap shit because they figured out what the cheap shit was before anyone else. I would also categorize people that are just really, really good at finding tech in this category as well. And I feel like most tech monsters aren't like top players, but one that I think is a top player is Fenritti. So you guys might know Fenritti from the Dragon Ball Z games, but he plays like everything. And he was known for like finding the craziest touch of death combos in like any situation. And then he'd back it up by actually doing them in match. And he kind of innovated the touch of death meta in Dragon Ball FighterZ. All right, so skill number 7 is uniqueness. I know this is like kind of hard one to describe, but if you've played against any of these players, you'll totally understand. It's like someone that has a completely different playstyle than anyone else, and it really throws you off. So this can be players like aMSa, who plays Yoshi and basically is the Yoshi above all other Yoshis because no one else plays like them, right? Basically aMSa had to develop their own playstyle to fight against the masses. They're very innovative strategies that people just haven't seen, and it gives them a leg up. It's not that aMSa is the most cracked player in the world by a long shot. That's part of it, actually. He's really good, but it's also that you can't train for aMSa, right? It's really hard to train for someone that plays that uniquely. I also think of iDOM's Laura in Street Fighter 5, very hard to train for because no one else played that character at a high level. And the best way to distinguish this between like lab monsters are there are people that just play the character differently, right? And Hotashi from Guilty Gear is one where everyone played Nago in a very like methodical way, and a very I'm gonna abuse the best options way. And Hotashi, you have this like completely mental stack, completely super fast pace, I'm a blood rage in your face at the wall, doing all this crazy stuff that no other Naga was doing, and it worked very well for him because he was basically playing a different game than everyone else. Like unlike the lab monster, this stuff wasn't really optimal, right? No one to this day is really doing blood rage setups like Hotashi is. But because this was so unique and it's so hard to prepare for, he made it work. Now, I also think these are like people that are like really good at fireball patterns. So you think of like someone that's really strong at zoning like Bonchan. You might play against a million other Sagats or Lukes, and then you run into Bonchan's Luke, and it's like, whoa, this is a completely different style. Even though they're doing mostly the same things, it's not new tech. They have a really weird timing to everything, and they have a very hard to predict playstyle because you don't play against someone like that very often. All right, so skill number 8 is, I'd say, the adaptation. This is a very obvious one. It's the ability to overcome your opponent as you get more information. Now, Daigo is like famously known for being like impossible to beat in the first to 10 set because his adaptation is just that good. But these are people that do really well in long sets. I also think of these players as ones that have a very diverse flow chart. And what this means is that you're playing your opponent and your opponent exhausts all their options. They use all their tech, and you still have many tricks left in the bag, and you still have many different ideas and ways to counteract their strategies. And once they counteract that, they're out of steam and you win the set, right? MKLeo is known for the game 4 comebacks where basically he might be losing a set or he's winning a set and it goes down to game 4, and MKLeo has an insanely high win rate on game 4. And if he wins game 4, he's most likely going to win game 5 because his adaptation is just that strong. All right, the last two are around mental. I actually think your mental game is very important for fighting games. That's something that transfers over very well. So I couldn't just keep it into one. So I split up into two. And I think the first is your clutch factor, like people that play best under pressure and just don't choke. Now, I think it's easier to come up with examples of people that choke, unfortunately, right? I'm not gonna name no names, but think of the amount of people that constantly get second or third place and they feel like they're cursed. But there's also people, conversely, that win the vast majority of time. They're put in these clutch situations. I think Justin Wong is a very good example. You look at his previous EVO runs, you look at his ability to clutch out a set. I think Justin Wong's definitely there. I also feel like there are players that have a disproportionate win rate when it comes to critical sets. Think getting into top 8 of a major, or top 6 if you're Evo because they have to show ads, or winning the grand finals of a tournament. And I think MenaRD is a very good example of this when they have a critical set to win, whether it's grand finals or getting into a top 8. If I feel like the percent win rate just skyrockets, and sometimes they can look very, very hard to beat. All right, I think the last one is like work ethic or grit. I don't know what you might call it, but it's like the power to keep persevering. Like, fighting games are hard, right? And it's very easy to get discouraged. It's very easy to grind out a lot of hours, go to a tournament, get washed, and be like, oh, this isn't for me. Like, oh no, what was me? Or like you play a new game and then you don't do as well as you want. And you're like, all right, well, this game's trash, right? You guys have probably seen a ton of that on Twitter, and I think these are the players that have the power to keep persevering through difficulties or adversities, right? The people that have the ability to sink tons of hours into the game and have a positive mindset and just keep going at it, right? I think Brian, that's a really good example of this. Being able to do content creation, have a job, and compete at a high level, you have to have really good work ethic and grit. Same thing with like players like Momochi, same idea. Like Momochi streams like insanely cracked amount of hours, and he's still a content creator too. It's a very important skill, and I think it's also how like having a positive mindset. Now, like, that's kind of hard to tell, like, you know, the mindset people are in, but be able to like not beat yourself up and take the right things from a loss, I think is very, very important as well. Now, what the hell do we do with all this information? Now, I like to think of it as like a stat chart. I used an Excel graph because I don't know how to make one of those, but you get the idea that like people just have different skills they're better at and worse at. And I think the first step to getting better fundamentals is being able to figure out where you're strong at and where you're weaker at, right? And the areas you're weaker at are going to be easier to improve upon, right? Because improving upon the stuff you're already really, really cracked on, you're just going to get diminishing returns. And I feel like you need all of these skills in order to be a top player. It's really, really hard to, you know, rely on a couple of these skills and just have like terrible game knowledge and terrible mental and be terrible at labbing and have the reactions of a 70-year-old dude. It's just not going to happen, right? So to me, you have to focus on your weak areas. And as I look back at this, I thought about where I was when I first started playing fighting games. And again, these numbers are just kind of made up. Like, no one's at 10, right? No one has 10 fundamentals for everything. I obviously think I have better fundamentals than most of the FGC, so like it's not proportional to population. But this is an example of 2016 Diaphone. And I think looking back at the 3 areas I improved the most were probably randomness, mental, and grit. And it's kind of like Diaphone got more random, what the hell? But yeah, I think this is actually something I deliberately improve upon. I forgot to mention Sonic Fox at all, but Sonic Fox is one of the players that I would study their gameplay. And I'd be like, how the hell is Sonic Fox winning? They're just doing the most random shit. They're getting away with it. I want to be able to do that. And so by studying Sonic and figuring out why they do some things that they do, and also taking like a more intuitive approach to the game, because I used to play very like by the book, and I realized that while that is viable, that's not 100% the way I want to play the game. And by bringing in like more instinct and intuition into the game, I was able to like kind of get better at randomness, and also like using my intuition, being like, all right, in order to be random, you have to choose good options and rotate them appropriately, right? And same thing with mine's mental and grit. I honestly think, you know, 2016 Diaphone did not take care of their health very well. I'm gonna keep it real. And so I think a lot of that was hitting the gym, focusing on diet, focusing on lifestyle, right? And also, like, you know, for like mental and like being able to like deal with clutch situations, there's a lot of books on the topic, right? Sports psychology is a very important thing. Sports athletes that get paid much more money than esports athletes focus on sports psychology. Teams have sports psychologists, right? There's a lot of information out there that can help you improve your mental game and grit. So that's where I improved upon. But I think any of these areas you can improve upon, you know, I was kind of thinking about this exercise when I was putting this together. I'm like, damn, my reactions are kind of ass. And then I Googled it, right? How to improve reaction time. And there's like a million things, right? And kind of the main takeaway is like, yeah, diet, exercise definitely help. And actually looking at my reaction times have improved. iPhone a few years ago probably had like a frame or two slower reaction times. But I also think it's like, I need to physically train my reactions more in game. So doing like drills where I try to whiff, kind of like what Daigo used to do, where he'd react to different stimuli and then try to reacting to it. Basically, I need to drill my reactions more, and then I could take the learnings from that to other games and focus on like playing more patient and practice reacting in match, right? Just off the top of my head, how you'd improve at some of the other ones, composure. It's like the people that panic DP too much. How do you get rid of a panic DP habit? Force yourself not to DP. You play matches, you don't focus on winning or losing, you're focused on not DP, right? And I think that's like how you have to go about composure, is you have to purposely put yourself in situations where you're forced to play lame and you're forced to stay composed. Execution, I think that's just repetition. The more fighting games you play, you'll just naturally get execution. Game knowledge and labbing are both something I was just like kind of good at, because you know, like science major, very analytical mind. I think I kind of transferred a lot of those skills to game knowledge and labbing. But honestly, like probably just comes down to spending time in training mode and trying to force yourself to come up with different ideas and force yourself to understand how the game works. And if you understand how the game works, you'll understand why different situations play out the way they do. I feel like a lot of people that are bad at game knowledge don't understand why things happen. They'll be like, oh, the game just randomly decided to do that. And if you guys know anything about games, nothing really happens randomly, unless it's Street Fighter 2, because it's hard coded to be random. Anyways, yeah, shouts to that game. Same thing with uniqueness, right? I think oftentimes it's really easy to copy what the top player is doing and then just do it yourself. But again, there's like, if you get really good at game knowledge and labbing, I think naturally uniqueness will come, as long as you kind of take it to the next extension and start implementing that stuff in match. In adaptation, I think grind monsters, I think if you play longer sets, you'll just naturally get better at adaptation. So how else can you use this information? So I think it's pretty obvious that if you're fighting against someone at your skill level and that has similar fundamentals to you, you should target the areas that they're weak against. But how would you fight against someone like Justin Wong, who probably has the best fundamentals in the world, if not close to it, right? You have to think fundamentals don't 100% correlate with in-game win rate. I know it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but if you have way more game hours than your opponent and it feels like nothing is going your way, you're probably targeting the wrong area of fundamentals to exploit. Even if their fundamentals are better, you can still overcome that by knowing the matchup better, or having your reactions to specific things trained, or knowing more gimmicks, or knowing more scenarios than your opponent. It doesn't matter who you are. Justin Wong, myself, Daigo, anyone. The first time I pick up a fighting game, it doesn't matter how good my fundamentals are, they can't carry me through the impossible. So I like to think of fundamentals as essentially a time multiplier, right? So I might learn a fighting game, you know, 1.5, 2 times as fast as someone else, because I have a base fundamentals that I can rely upon and I can use to help me learn more efficiently. But fundamentals can't do the impossible and overcome game specific skills that you pick up through playing the game a lot. It's kind of like shooters, where you know, a person that's really good at shooters can transition from one game to another because their aim is just so much better. But if you don't know the mechanics behind, you know, the good spots in the map, or what heroes synergize with each other, or the meta, I don't fucking know. I don't play shooters, but you get the idea. Now, there's one other thing I want to talk about. Like, I wanted to include an 11th category, which is like versatility, which is like people that are able to play like many different characters and play styles. But the more I think about it, I actually think these are just players that have really, really good fundamentals. So for example, Sonic Fox, who's one of the best multi-game players, is able to like pick up many different characters and play them kind of in their own style. And I think it's just because their fundamentals are crazy. Same thing with Justin, right? Justin plays any game. They're one of the best at any game they pick up. I think it's just they have crazy fundamentals. Those fundamentals give them the versatility to play the characters and to play the games that they want at a high level. I kind of just made 10 categories that felt right to me, but these aren't like the be all end all definition of fundamentals. I'm sure you could further define these skills more. Like, I could break this down into 12 categories. I could break this down into, you know, execution, for example. I could break it down to multiple different types of execution. You know, how well can you play puppet characters? How well can you negative edge? How well can you do certain inputs? How clean are your inputs? How well, like, you know, what kind of controller you use? How fast can you dash? How fast can you walk block? Like, there's so many execution things that you could like break it up into different sections. Now, of course, I didn't do that just for simplicity's sake, but you know, the definition of fundamentals, I think, is very vague because it's very hard to define. And the whole point of this is just to give you like a framework to which to think of things and identify your weak spots so you can improve upon them. Anyways, guys, let me know what you think. I know it's a little different of a video. I'm trying to make more fighting game knowledge videos. So if you like this, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Let me know you want to see more. Take care and have a good one.